The machine that makes you invisible. I bought a machine that could make you invisible and it was super expensive. I wanted to be invisible as I was planning to commit a few crimes, and so becoming invisible was the best option. When I bought the machine and I had to put it together, I was surprised by how simple it was to put it together. Then when I first went into the machine and turned it on, I expected to become invisible, but instead the machine made me incredibly obese. I was angry as I wanted to become invisible and not obese. When I went outside, nobody really cared about me or even care enough to notice me. Then I went back into the machine again after a few days and I was no longer obese at this point. When I turned the machine back on, I expected to become invisible. Instead I found myself not being invisible, but rather I had become extremely short. I was essentially short. I was angry and I went outside screaming and shouting. Nobody cared enough to notice me. I mean, they could see me but they didn't care about. I was almost invisible, you could say, but in the horrible nobody cares about you way. Then after a couple of days I was back to my normal self and I went into the machine. This time the machine made me disabled and I was furious again. I hated being disabled and nobody cared about me. I mean, I could have been ran over and nobody will even care. I am invisible to them emotionally but not physically. It felt horrible and I phoned the company that sold me this invisibility machine. They told me that the machine was just finding its bearing and that it was just figuring out its bearing of what invisibility is. I had to patient. Then when I went into the machine again after regaining back my body again, the machine did something to me, and whenever someone looked at me they thought I was a bus driver, Amazon delivery guy or some other low-paid worker. They didn't care about me or my well-being as I was not seen as an important person. I mean, being this kind of invisible made me extremely distraught, and how can anyone live like this? To not be seen or heard even though you are not physically invisible. Anything could happen to me and no one would care. Then when I went back into the machine simply made me old. I was so horribly invisible in front of people as they did not care about me. I was just some old person at the end of my tether. I was on death's door and I was so sick at the same time. Then when I went back to being my proper age, I went back into that machine. Finally, the machine had turned me physically and fully invisible. I can now walk into any shop, supermarket or bank and rob them.